Good morning. Today is Thursday, June 19th, 2025. I'm your host, rdizzle408, with co-host ML Shah. Welcome to welcome to the unaffiliated follow-up to Mark Halperin's 2A. This is America's Talk Show. Okay, now we're going to go back to our gallery view. All right. We're going to set the stage, folks, so bear with us, okay? Ancient history, Genesis 9:18. The sons of Noah who went out of the boat were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis 10:6. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Libya, and Canaan were the ancestors of the peoples who bear their names. The descendants of Cush were the people of Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, and Sabtika. Genesis 10:21-22. Shem, the older brother of Japheth, was the ancestor of all the Hebrews. Shem's sons Elam, Asher, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram were the ancestors of the peoples who bear their names. FYI, Aram is another name for Syria. Arpachshad was the father of Shelah, who was the father of Aber, a cognate of Hebrew. Okay, now to recent history. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter ousted the Shah of Iran and his claim to Middle East domination. The further claim is the Shah was acquiring an atomic bomb supplied by French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing and his Prime Minister Jacques Chirac. To replace him, on the advice of his security advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, he moved Imam Ruhollah Khomeini from France to Tehran. Israel initially supported Iran against Iraq, supplying it with weapons as needed. Tel Aviv even organized the Iranian part of the Iran-Contra scandal. Then it gradually changed its strategy while retaining some remnants of the Shah's period. Thus, the EAPC-B consortium, half owned by each of the two states, continues to operate the Eilat-Ashkelon pipeline. That's EILAT, Ashkelon pipeline, which is essential to the Israeli economy. In 2019, the Knesset adopted a law punishing any publication about the owners of this company with 15 years imprisonment, supposedly, okay? Deep State, including the Israeli faction, took out the top Muslim in the region. This is my take. And now all I hear is kvetching about it. Why are Muslims crazy? We would be crazy too if they took out Lincoln. Oh, wait, they did take out Lincoln, and we did go a little crazy there. As far as Hamas and the Muslim brothers, the NATO-backed Arab Spring was the golden window to back Assad and the Syrian Arab army to annihilate the Muslim brothers. But, I'm putting quotes here, Israel picked Hamas, okay? Did the IDF rescue moderate Syrian rebels? Yes, the Israeli Defense Force did rescue and assist moderate Syrian rebels during the Syrian civil war, particularly those operating near the Israeli border in the Golan Heights, okay? And we even have Trump sharing, okay, Trump revealed Israeli commando and Mossad operations in Syria to Russians, okay? This is a Haaretz article. Trump allegedly disclosed an undercover Israeli mission to penetrate an Islamic State cell developing bombs that could go through airports undetected, okay? Leaders of the Palestinian Islamist movement Hamas turned publicly against their longtime ally, President Bashar al-Assad of Syria, on Friday, endorsing the revolt aimed at overthrowing his dynamic rule. So now here we are. My take in conclusion, the Muslim Brotherhood, so-called Muslim Brotherhood, is in part in there messing up U.S. foreign policy, okay? So we have to root out what's going on. I know that was a lot. Thank you for bearing with me, folks. And now let's open it up on the discussions. Okay, yes, and Deborah's, I will put the sources in the chat there. Thank you for that question. Okay, I think that was a lot for folks here. All right, Claudio.
Yes, I know we have a different thing than the nations deal with Sunni terrorism, or let's be honest, when we talk about Muslim Brotherhood, we talk about Salafism. So it's a specific extremistic current of the Islam, and it's, as we say, connected with Said al-Qutb and Hosni al-Banna, or as Shamsul call it, Hassan al-Banna, because, you know, depends in which language you say the name. So in our language is Hosni. I don't know why. Like Hosni Mubarak, the former military leader of Egypt. And the thing is that the reality is that also Europe and Israel sometimes have done the wrong thing to support Salafi Islam in, if I remember well, PLO was considered secular, but in reality, it wasn't so secular because in reality, if I remember well, Arafat was a Sunni. A few members that were with him were considered lay people, secular people, but in reality, most of the time, they were the part related with Islam governing. It was also the one not helping with the distribution of the funds, because there was this problem when the first National Palestinian Association has been created, that all the money that were going to be used on buildings, on construction of city, because let's be honest, when Trump say about the Gaza Strip already was an idea when it was created the first Palestinian National Organization there. And in reality, what happened, that all the money that Arafat and his friends that were controlling, that were used in a clientelistic way. And between these clients, let's be honest, there was also Hamas. So it wasn't just Israel that was enjoying this money. It was also, sorry, they were not enjoying just the Israel money, but also the Palestinian money. So it's half fund. Instead, when you deal with Shia connected terrorism, we know that most of the time that is the end of Iran. Let's be honest, since 1979, Iran financed these people. It wasn't the West, it wasn't the CIA, as some people say, it wasn't some European Weir Foundation. Maybe some European Arabs have founded that through FDI, through individual investments, but it's a deal. Then there is also another thing. All the people that were connected with the Arab Emirates, many of the Arab Emirates, they are not pro-Western people, let's be honest. There were people that were in Saudi Arabia also against bin Salman. For example, Khashoggi. When in Europe we talk about Khashoggi, hey, they killed a journalist. It's not good to kill the journalist. Yes, but these journalists, people should notice that was a people against the right of women to vote, the right of women to drive, the right of women to have an education. I mean, we should distinguish, as we say in Italian, between the apples and the pears. That was not a journalist defending some rights or some freedoms of people. It was an oppressive guy. So we should be careful about how many entities are fighting this terrorist state. And sometimes, let's be honest, these people are between journalists, are between NGO association, like for example the NRWA. They are in academies. What happened in Harvard is a proof of that. In Europe, it could be something similar. So we should be conscious that they were the first to do the so-called hybrid wars like Russia is doing now because of Ukraine.
Thank you, Claudio. Yes, and I'm glad you brought up Khashoggi, because I believe that the Khashoggi example, right? The initial reaction was, "Oh my God, this journalist! Look what they've done to him!" Not, "Oh, here's a mujahideen, right, that is now posing as a journalist." Okay, and that also brings up. It reminds me of Turkey. I heard an interview yesterday. I thought it was very interesting, okay, with Kevork Almasian, right? This is the Syrian Armenian Christian who's now taken refuge in Germany, okay? And he was pointing out that Iran essentially abandoned Syria, okay, and that Turkey was really the aggressor, okay? I know I mentioned like Israeli factions, right? But it's really Erdogan that was pushing the whole thing. And when Assad was asked to shake hands with Erdogan, he's like, "Yo, is Turkey going to get its troops out of Syria?" Okay, and apparently that never really happened here, right? So I think Erdogan's a big factor in this. And we mentioned the Salafis, Al-Banna, Muslim Brotherhood, and I know for the YouTube audience, it's like, who are these people, right? But there is also a parallel Muslim Brotherhood Shia faction within Iran, okay, which also muddles these things further, right? So it seems like, and I would like to bring other folks into this conversation, right, that Trump is now, well, okay, what did Sean Spicer say? He was like 90-10, now 60-40. So I'm just curious where the winds are blowing in terms of how much is Trump thinking of in terms of bombing Iran, or what is the current discussion? Maybe I didn't catch all of it. So if folks might clue me in. And ML, I'm going to bring you in on this.
The best that I can reckon is that there are two plans on either Israel or the U.S. do like a joint thing, and nobody has said that U.S. would do this. You either do people land in and then they secure the facility and they do a raid and they secure the overall area with so they can effectively do whatever they want, or we drop a few bombs and that, but that's on one side of the thing. And then the other question, the lingering question is regime change, which I don't know that I've heard. I don't know that we'll do that. But I see all I see is rev up. The only rev up I see is the old Shah waiting in the wings or whatever, the old Iranian royal family, whatever the hell that is, and then them giving this and that. But I don't know what what we'll do. But I would say, kind of going back to your observation about Sean, actually to me, not today, but yesterday morning, he seemed to kind of like really roll off of the regime change throttle, so to speak. But it's hard to discern where he's at or whatever. But that just goes to show that we're taking our time, and when whatever our military assets get in the Nimitz is going to be there this weekend. We had 30 plus tankers that flew over from Kaunas, the United States, over to Europe to get ready to stage. Those 30 or so tankers can sustain up to 200 aircraft sorties therein. So whatever we're doing, we're gearing up to do something big with the air or not. And who knows what the hell that means for special forces, or if we do, or if we let the Israelis go in there with their raiders and do the take out Ford row is what to specific. I didn't say that, but anyway, that's what I can say.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that update, ML. I missed a lot of that, so really grateful for that. Claudio from Italy.
Instead, from what I understood, in reality, the so-called military involvement there is in the so-called form of the free green mice, in the sense that there is already probably Delta GRU and FGRU trying to do the so-called popular revolt operations. In reality, in my opinion, what he's trying to do, there is this social political theory that you have already 3.5% of the population of Iran that is able to revolt. You can topple a government. I think Trump is waiting if this government revolt is possible at the moment. I'm feeling that while the time is moving and moving, these things becomes always possible, especially when you see that Iranian people are being able to hack the national television and put a popular revolt announcement without the help of the Israelis. Also, there was this attack to the Bitcoin assets used by the Shah and the people to circumvent the so-called international sanctions in free banks, and also to a Bitcoin fund called the Nobitex. In my opinion, the reason why Trump is waiting is for few reasons. He prefers to go on the side and to sustain Israel in the logistical level, because what people don't know now is that the Arrow missiles that Israel has as a dotation are ending, and also the Patriots. And they are also having problem to use the interceptors that can be used against that Iran missile called the Sagil. That is a two-plans missile that is similar to the possible hypersonic missiles that Russia have and could use in Ukraine, that never used it because it's too much scared to destroy that asset that is Ukraine. And another thing is that Israel, in my opinion, has an alternative to use the massive penetrator on Fordo. It could simply put people inside that, do a so-called internal explosion, and not using the massive operative penetrator. But the thing is that we should see on the next weeks. I don't think it will be something decided on the weekend or others. I think we are in a very fluid situation, and it depends how much is able Israel by himself to do stuff. And I had Israeli friends that say it's being a waste of money to put all the crafters, the Nimitz, the things. But at the same time, we should remember that these things can also be used to give missiles, to provide the basis for airplanes that were flying and be refueled. It's not a waste if Trump doesn't make an involvement of US in this war, because he can simply use that for logistical support, and that's enough.
Claudio, your Israeli friends, what are I'm curious then, what do they have another take, or regarding the carriers?
Another take is that for now they didn't find an alternative to use the B-52 to go against Fordo, because Fordo is the most important part. All the stuff that is a reactor that can be used to enrich the uranium have already been destroyed. They destroyed Iraq, for example, yesterday. And another problematic is, as I say, to see how much people will need to do the revolt. Regarding the Shah thing, it's correct. It's true that the Shah has already a 100 days plan to use a provisional government, and there are already people inside the Shia regime that are ready to change sides and help with the transitional government. But as I say, until the Pasdaran, until the population don't give a concrete revolt to the Khamenei, it will not happen. Also, we should take in mind another thing, that US could also wait that the Pasdaran does a mistake to enter in the fight, because the Pasdaran plan was to destroy the US bases without waiting that the US was entering in the war. And it could be that some Pasdaran will try to do that if they are going on the brink of despair. So maybe Trump is also waiting for that. At that point, neither Carson, neither Charlie Kirk, neither Bernie Sanders can say, hey, the US should not be involved, because they are killing US bases. They are not killing only our allies.
And I guess what I'm curious about is I'm seeing, on Twitter, unsurprisingly, people that are pro-Shah, right? Back during Obama, they were, it's like whenever there's a whiff of, oh my God, finally, we can get Khomeini out, then the pro-Shah faction, they're all about it. But do they really reflect a greater majority? And then there's other people that go, hey, when are we going to talk about like the Shah and a critical faction? And I guess the son, right? It gets confusing because this Pahlavi, it goes back to Reza Shah, then Reza Shah Pahlavi, then the current is like the junior or whatever, right? But is he really that popular? And then I guess, Claudia, do you know the status of the internet in Iran? I thought it was taken out. Is that not?
Yes, it has been cut off, and it's both for Iranian reason, but also for Israeli reasons, because it's to prevent possible Iran hacking attacks on Israel. But in reality, being the Iran system a very close one, also much more close than the North Korea system, they will not be able to do so-called hacking attacks, let's be honest. And the people in Iran, it's natural for them to use VPNs and this kind of thing, because the regime is not scared about that. They are more about the so-called person-by-person control. They, like the Hamas, they don't do control in a CCTV system like in London, like in China. They prefer that they have a so-called guidance patrol that when you see something weird, whistle the blow and call the Basiji to kill these people that do morally wrong stuff. And in my opinion, the only problem that can do the possible US involvement is that it can make possible the birth of a faction that could be anti-Shah and also anti-transitional government. That, for example, instead of a Shia government, you can have a Sunni government or an Islamic State kind of government. And in this case, I agree with Daryl when he said we should not be involved in any way. We should be involved just in one case. If you are certain that there is a popular revolt, if we are certain that there is an agreement between the former members of the Shia government with the Shah to have a 100 days provisional government, and if is certain that the Pasdaran will not attack military bases. Otherwise, it will be stupid for the US to have any other involvement that is not to support the logistics, to go in a strategic way.
All right, thank you for that, Claudio. I want to welcome in Daryl and Frank. Hope you guys are doing well over here. And we're just continuing the conversation. You can see going back and forth about what's going on over there, Israel, Iran.
Were you guys talking about Iran again?
What else?
Yeah, what else can you talk about right now?
I guess I'll throw a little bit in the pot. Daryl, you mentioned the scarves around the women's necks the other day. Was that just a coincidental thing, or why did you mention the scarves?
Well, I think, and I'm being respectful by saying this, I think people in this country have been misled as to the true conditions in Iran. And I'm not disputing any, it's an Islamic country and all that, and there's bad things that have happened and do happen. And I'm sure there's very conservative areas, but there's also very liberal areas too. And I just think it would do well for everyone to just pull up some like Tehran travel videos and just watch them. That's all I did. I was curious the other day. I was like, let me watch some videos of people walking around Tehran. And what I saw was a bunch of young people, some women with no scarves at all, some women with just scarves around their necks, like showing their hair, walking around. There's like restaurants and I don't know. It seems like a pretty nice place. So when I hear like, oh, they're all bloodthirsty and, women are super oppressed and they can't do anything, like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like that to me. Maybe in some areas, but not from what I saw.
Do you know why, though, that you're right, some women may not have scarves, but why do other women have the scarves?
I believe they have the scarves because when they go to certain areas, they probably need to put them on. Like if they go to an area that's more sensitive, a religious site, or I do know there's religious police that try to enforce like certain ethics codes. Let's put them that way. Yeah, I mean, if that's their culture, like who am I to judge it? Like, I mean, to a certain extent, we have to accept that other people are going to do things different ways. And now I'm not saying women should be oppressed, but, or I'm okay with that, but I don't know. It doesn't seem as clear cut as people make it seem to me.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And I just wanted to draw that out because I'm not saying that, okay, a woman has to wear a scarf. Oh my God, so now we have to nuke the place, right? I know there's different things going on, right? We're talking about preventing a nuclear armed Iran on one hand, and then we're mentioning, okay, what's going on with that society. But for the YouTube audience, right, and possibly for world peace and women's progress, right, let it be known that chapter 2 of the Quran, verse 256, makes it very clear. There is no compulsion in religion. Okay, so this whole idea that a woman has to cover her hair or there's some sort of sin and the law is coming in, that is nowhere found in the Quran. Okay, this comes from something called hadith or hafiz. Now we're getting really into the weeds, but for the YouTube viewers out there, right, this is that, okay, 100 or 200 years after Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, right, after he died, people wrote down, this is how I saw the Prophet live. This is how I saw what he did, da-da-da-da, okay? Like if you were to get into Alcoholics Anonymous, people will say, Bill Wilson said tomato sauce. He was eating tomato sauce. Like we're getting into third-hand accounts, and this is what's used to justify the so-called Sharia, okay? So just trying to draw out some kind of inconsistencies, right? That, veiling is not a cultural thing, but it has some roots in some kind of odd scriptures that are not the Quran, not the Bible. And Duke, you had your hand up, so I wanted to see if you're still.
Yeah, I was just going to mention to Daryl that the tourism video might not be the best place to get unbiased opinion. They're trying to sell you on coming.
Well, when I say tourism videos, I mean just like walking around, like people, like Europeans who just have gone there and they're just doing like, you ever see like a travel walk around video where they just have the camera on and they're just walking around and you watch it?
Were you on Google or YouTube?
It's on YouTube. There's lots of them.
Yeah,
just check them out.
I would say that would be more reliable than Google.
Well, and it's also, I'll point out, Duke, that there's parts of Iran that we could go to and would be more comfortable for us than parts of India, right? So it's like India, you're going to have all these freedoms, you're right. But then people go, oh my God, it's a circus. And then people go to China, they go, oh, it's so modern, right? But then we know China has its own issues. So it's a very interesting world. And as outsiders, we're never going to be treated right. It's one thing, Luke from China talks about this all the time. He can be very critical of the Chinese government because he's an outsider, right? The moment you're one of them, you're on the insides, then all of a sudden it's a very different story. Another follow-up question for you, Duke. You were talking about some of the numbers the other day. I think how many IRGC troops there? 150,000?
No, 500,000. And I would say 499,000 are surrounded for no.
So are you in the camp of a limited strike to deal with the nuclear weapons? Is that what you're hoping for?
Absolutely. But then I also have grave concern about the retaliation that would be coming and against our troops in the area. My main concern is Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Now, how you get there is up to somebody other than me. But I am a firm believer that we cannot be in that camp.
Well, and I think I was misunderstood pointing out like how the Iron Dome was overwhelmed. I'm not physics and engineering. I'm a computer engineer background, so I love the concept of missile defense, a hypersonic, how these things Mach 6, that's all great. But in the end of the day, to rely on missile defense alone, right? I mean, someone got injured in Israel from that hospital strike, right? So some families out there grieving, and they're being told, "Well, don't understand. This is a bigger geopolitical."
Nobody died in that hospital attack. They had evacuated the hospital beforehand.
Yeah, just started. It wasn't anyone that has been dying. There was this news, but it wasn't neither from Israeli, and it was from Al Jazeera saying people dying to say, "Hey, look, Iran is doing some damages." No, Iran was
and it was Mark's take is, oh, Iran's lucky that they didn't do damage. Okay, my take is, some parent out there a parent anywhere, right? Your kid gets injured for whatever reason and you're trying to make sense. So all I'm trying to say is we can have all the superior missile defenses in the world, right? But eventually some sort of treaties, something needs to be crafted, right? So that there's, hopefully more stability in the region. I guess last question, Duke, after the nuclear strikes, then do you think there's, what would be the follow-up after that?
Well, I wish I had an answer. I don't mind that their current administration stay in place. How they rule themselves is how they rule themselves. If people want to rise up and do something about it, then people have to rise up and do something about it. And I think that needs to be organic. I think we need to keep our folks out of it completely. I don't have to agree with what they do in their civilization and in their world. You were talking about China earlier. I was over there several years ago, and we were in Singapore, and then traveled into interior China, and it's two different worlds. In Singapore, it's like being in New York City, and you get outside of the countryside, and they're still using branch brooms tied to sticks to sweep the streets, and everybody's driving a moped. So yeah, it's but again, that's not my concern. And once we take out their nuclear capability, and I'm sure if the current regime stays in place, they'll try to resurrect it. But right now, now is the time to deal with it, and they've never had this opportunity. I do not believe, and we have to take it out. We have to do something about it.
What are you enjoying in the back there, Duke? You got some other thing more enjoyable than this new stuff.
Well, my wife is home today.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, talking about China versus Singapore, that also reminded me a week or two ago when our good friend Andrij was saying, you know, oh, in Russia, 20% doesn't have indoor plumbing. And I'm like, Andrij, I can take you to the Rio Grande Valley and, you know, McAllen, modern city, modern streets. And all we have to do is a 15-minute drive west to Palmhurst, right? South Texas. And you're going to see portables on cinder blocks, and there's no indoor plumbing, and there's dirt floors. And, you know, I was even part of a service group, a church group, to go, oh, we're going to go paint the roofs for the house for this guy. And then the owner of the home, he didn't really care for it. He's like, dude, it's a portable. I got dirt floors, whatever. It's temporary. So it's just who's oppressed, who's not oppressed. You know, it's a very, I don't know. It gets funny when you get into the nitty gritty. Claudio?
No, in fact, I was to call up to say something about that also in smaller states like Italy, we have the same, that you go in, there is this huge division between urban and rural, and there are some rural places that they don't want to have all this progress, because in their opinion, that is their traditional way of living. What they just want is a possibility for the younger to have fast transportation that allow them in few hours to go back in their place if they want. And regarding what he was saying, Daryl, is that it's true what he's saying, but I want to explain the reason why this thing is possible. One is that, for example, there are few quarters where there are more so-called Iranian that have been outside Iran, and that can create an influence. You cannot constrain these people to live the culture in the same way of an Iranian that lived in Iran. And another thing is what I said before, being the guidance police, just basing their inspection of the mores and vices, as he said in Saudi Arabia, on self, not online, not through video cameras, not through that, it became difficult in certain times to arrest a lot of people because they don't have the scarves and because they don't respect the rules, because you create an internal revolt in a certain city, and they can create the real reason for a popular revolt. If you have, for example, the mother of these daughters, the son of these people that they are being arrested, and so they arrive, the mothers and the others, to fight these people and transform them in martyrs. So the thing is that, as Dorel said, that in Tehran is not one of the most conservative places. In reality, in fact, most of the regime members and adherents have studied in place more conservative than Tehran. Tehran still keeps a part of his Reza Pahlavi soul, and many people hide this thing.
Claudia, here's another aberration of Islamism, right? Because of this homophobia, they found a loophole. So transgender surgeries are actually like Persia, Iran is like one of the big places.
Yes.
So that to get around the morality police, okay, if I'm gay, then I'll just get my gay boyfriend to become a woman. And so now
Yes.
I'm kosher. Sorry, no pun intended there. But there are gaping holes in Islamism, this idea that, oh, they're so moral, but then there's this other stuff going on. Bacha bazi is another thing I would point out for the YouTube viewers. Bacha just means kid or son or boy. Bazi, bazaar, store. Okay, so bacha bazi means literally going to the store and the boys are dancing and they're dancing for money. Okay, and so we talk about grooming gangs in this country, and it's like it goes back to these very retrograde practices, right, that have no place in a modern society.
Yeah, because for them is the correspondent of the eunuchs of these kind of people. They are not considered men. They are considered an halfway that also in the Quran was present. They were neither women and neither female, but it's not because of a religious reason. It's also for a cultural reason, because for them was easier to control a certain male population, because let's remember the cult of the harem, the past in the Ottoman Empire. There is all this stuff that influenced their culture, and it's sometimes put back in these places, as you say, in a retrograde way. And another fact is that many schools have tried to make these people, especially the young generation, to forget what it was during the Reza Pahlavi period. But let's be honest, all the mothers and the daughters, once they are in their home, they have their own teachings and they know their own things. And once they go out their home, they have a different culture. And it's normal. Persepolis, in the comic Persepolis explain this thing, that the people that from Germany go back to Tehran, once they're home, you see them in a mini skirt, you see them well dressed with lipstick, and once they go outside of home, one of the reasons why they put burqa or hijab is to hide the Western vices, and it's normal, because otherwise it will arrive at Basija, it will kill them on spot.
Yes, and I'm just going to kind of talk extemporaneously here for a moment, that we're praying for, okay, you know, enlightenment in any sphere. So it could come from the public. It could also come from the regime, okay? And enlightenment in that sense means that, okay, Muslims who are fanatical, right? They're looking for purity, but if they can be enlightened to realize people of the book, okay, who are the people of the book? Because the Quran is very explicit that people of the book are immune, right, from God's judgment because they've been following, meaning they've inherited this. This goes far back. I'm talking about the lineage, okay? Yesterday, I believe I mentioned Hammurabi. They should still be teaching that, I hope, in schools. Hammurabi, Book of Law, okay? It's theorized that Hammurabi, if we break up that name, Hammurabi, Rabi, the B becomes a V, Ravi, Ravan, okay? I just happened to be watching the Ramayana again with my son, okay? It's like the Iliad and Odyssey of India, okay? And in the Ramayana, okay, Ravan is the Assyrian, okay? He's called a Raksha, but that's just another word for Assyrian. Syrian, Sur, sun, Assyrian, okay, with the A, not sun, moon, okay? These are the lunar, solar dynasties, okay? Ravan, the Assyrians, if we look in the Old Testament, there's this amazement, this worship of Assyria, the great empire, and the Lord keeps saying, don't worship the empire. Their power comes from the Lord, from me, right? The Lord, not this state rule. But again, overwhelming military power, it's very seductive. So Ravan, in his hubris, okay, says, you know what? I want Ram's wife. Okay, this story, I'm trying to make it very short here, but essentially, Ravan feels entitled to this other king's wife. Ravan happens to be married. Ravan's wife says, you're such a great king. You've established law in the land, right? Don't you know it's wrong to kidnap another man's wife? If you're truly honorable, you will fight him in a battle and you will win her in war, okay? The reason I'm mentioning this story is this idea of women's rights. It's already been settled within the great religious texts, right? So these things need to be uncovered so that people who are a fanatical bent, they can go, oh, wait a minute. There's something here that we're just ignoring. Now, with that extemporaneous bit, I'd like to bring in Frank, if you wouldn't mind, Frank Kapman, because he happens to give us some sober analysis here. So, Frank?
No, I don't. Well, I'm very interested in your lessons of culture and history and all that sort of thing. So I think it's very remarkable. I don't learn anything if I'm talking, so that's I like to listen. Okay, and anyway, so I'm concerned about what happens after this bomb is dropped and that sort of thing. But I don't want to drag us back to the Israeli-Iran conflict. Anyway, but I'm very concerned because first of all, it might not work. Second of all, there was some hint yesterday that Israel had a method to take care of this facility, and but there was a Wall Street Journal article, but I looked for the Wall Street Journal, I couldn't find it, and I'm interested in that aspect of it.
You mean, Frank, involving like not bombs but more covert?
No, I have no idea. Maybe, look, they've had 20 or 30 years to think about this, and do you think they have done nothing in terms of R&D and things like this to think of a way to destroy that facility? And then finally, once the facility is destroyed, that just delays the project. It doesn't stop the project. And so, as long as you have a government that wants to have these bombs, and if you delete the theocracy, which you could possibly do by, various means, you still have the military, and the military, they want to protect themselves and the country, and having a nuclear weapon is a pretty good way to do it. So I think there's a strong constituency to have the nukes, but it's not just the nukes. It's the imperialism. It's the it's the export of violence and death to America, death to Israel, this kind of thing. That is also very concerning. So anyway, these are some issues, but I don't want to necessarily drag this conversation back to them. Anyway,
no,
so
but I think that was great.
My hand.
I appreciate it though, Frank, just kind of just stating out there what's on the table, right? That's what we need to be hearing about. Claudio?
From what I understood, before to destroy the facilities, they killed the 9 main physicists that they were doing this project. And so all the physicists that were responsible to check all these places that were creating and enriching this uranium are now died. Also, everything was in digital archive. So if they don't have any paper archive with them, in theory, they shouldn't have any more data, also the military, to recreate back this stuff. So they should, as they say, reinvent the wheel before to reuse the nuclear again. So it will take, again, 25 years. But the real problem is the fact that in Fordo, there is a possibility to destroy them. The problem is that it will take personnel. And before that, the military will let personnel from Israel or from the Mossad to arrive inside there. Probably they will give the best take of Israel. The reason why Israel is fighting through air is because they have a weakness in terms of land operations. It's because they have a weak in using tanks or that kind of operations for that reason. And this weakness is well known by many of the actors inside Israel. Also, there is the reason why Hamas did a ground operation on October 7 is because they don't have a very big land preparation. Also because they have a very, how can I say, is a strong military, but is a very specialized military. Is not an all-purpose military.
They have severe manpower problems.
And they have also a severe manpower problem, exactly. It's also that another reason. And so the reason why you don't still see in the Wall Street Journal the alternatives to the operation is because probably they are thinking to use specific missiles. For example, they want to put a missile inside one opening of Fordo, maybe. Or another reason it can be that they want to try a way to use the MOP. So to create some system that allow them to use the MP without the US using the B-52. That's the reason why there is still nothing. Or another reason can be simply that once they have the help of the military of the Shah, as you say, that defends the people and defend the country, but they don't necessarily defend the Khamenei. They can decide, look, we want to be safe. We don't want to give our country to other people. We are okay to the provisional government with the Shah. So have this transitional with also former members of the Khamenei government, and they can decide by themselves to go in to the site, to destroy the site and have an agreement with the EIA or other entities to create other facilities, like, for example, the Weizmann Institute in Israel or the Negev Israel. Because there is also another thing that is not well known, that, you know, Raul, there is this problem that Israel doesn't say if they have the nuclears or not. The reality is that in reality there are, but you know how many there are, because they have America that is collaborating, UK is collaborating, Sweden is collaborating with them. So they are in an international oversight. The problem is that Iran, except the so-called Obama JCPOA period, the reality is that when they do the investigation, they were neither noticed that the enrichment, it wasn't simply at the 4%, it was already at 12%, then it became 20, then it became 40. The risk, in my opinion, it has been the mistake to say they have the nuclear bomb. No, the problem is not they have the nuclear bomb, it's that they were having facilities that allowed them to have nuclear bomb. The so-called enrichment, the so-called, in Italian are called mixer, frullatori, that are the ones that enrich the uranium in a so powerful way. And Fordo is not important
Centrifuge.
because, thank you, centrifuges, yes. Fordo is not important because they have the plans of the nuclear bomb there. It's because they have a lot of these centrifuges, and that's why they want to destroy Fordo. And that's why it's under a mountain, because they want to keep this new generation centrifuges protected. In some way, they created that centrifuges without the UN stopping them to use these ones.
Thank you, Claudio. And I unmuted Jen there, just seeing, Jen, if you'd like to comment on anything. Just curious, your thoughts?
No, I'm just listening today. I'm eating, so having
Great.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just add something here. If this thing is destroyed with some ordnance of some sort, the material is still there unless it's released into the environment. So you can mine it. And there's enough there to build several nuclear weapons, I guess, if it's further refined. So I think that's kind of a mess. So I just wanted to add that. And also regarding the regime change and the ability to negotiate with a military government, you know, I think that needs to be explored. Also, you have these various ethnic groups. You know, I don't know. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them or something, you know, and they have names and they have constituencies, and they might have, you know, plans of their own. So I think all this stuff makes for a very interesting situation. And so those are my concerns.
And Frank, have you seen any independent or just objective analysis of Iran in beyond nuclear, just like coal, oil, gas? Like, what is the actual situation of the grid in the country? Just curious. Any?
I have no idea. I'm ignorant, and I can't get any good information anywhere.
Okay, so we're in the same boat.
I do know, you know, the vast majority of Iranian petrochemicals are going to China. I think, you know, that's one thing people aren't talking about too, is like, what's China's role going to be in this thing? And when they have such an economic influence or interest in Iran.
I think, Dorel, they can do a very, how can I say, astute thing, that they can buy that assets, in my opinion, if the government doesn't find any people that want to control them. Because let's be honest, Darrell, now every resource inside Iran is nationalized. Khamenei was promising to use that in an Islamic capitalist way. No, it has been a socialist at the end, for many reasons, for also to, how can I say, to convince the military to stay with him. They say, hey, look, you stay with me and I give you the possibility to control the oil fields, the coal fields, also the so-called storage, the storage ice, the caviar. For example, all caviar fields are under military control because they were exchange money, because they were not paying these people. These people have this control. So in my opinion, what can happen is that all these military people decide to create, how can I say, they can become private companies and they can influence the future Iranian politics, or if they are not able for entrepreneurial, for lack of entrepreneurial skills, they could sell everything to China. Let's be honest. They will not sell that to Israel. They will not sell to US. They can really say, hey, look, China, we are not able to hold these assets because we don't know how to invest them. Come and you do all these investments, and then it will happen all a so-called agreement. I know they have some agreements also with some European countries. For example, Italy, because of Eni, he has some good agreements for the oil. It could be possible that Europe can have some influence, but I'm not so sure. I think they will prefer more Chinese control, also because they will not create issues like, hey, if you stay here, you have to behave in X way, in their way, the so-called human resources culture. I think Raul knows what I talk about when I say human resources culture. But say, hey, don't say this thing, don't do that, don't do this other, don't be a racist, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, the censorship by another name. And since Claudio mentioned the Iranian Kurds, I will also have to share, right, this, what I've read on the Shahnameh, okay, again, the Persian Epic of Kings. The story goes, right, you had these good kings, and then along came Zohar, the evil one, all right, and cast a spell on the king, okay, and convinced the king that there was two serpents attacking the king, okay, and in order for the king to withstand the serpent's attack, he had to eat kids' brains, okay? So every day they would go out and the sacrifice, and this is the king, okay? The story on the origin of the Kurds is that on the certain days, the king was fooled, okay? And instead of kids' brains, it was goat brain or whatever. And so those kids that were saved, okay, went off in the wilderness and became the Kurds, okay? I know it's a crazy story, right? But there's also an idea, again, back to Assyria, the Kurds, right? So it's kind of in the Bible what happened to Assyria, right? The empire was torn to shreds. So if you meet Assyrian people today, okay, just like Persians, actually a guy just yesterday delivered the Walmart delivery was a Assyrian guy. And again, the culture it's very pro-Western, but it's like the nation will never be again. So when I see these things about Kurdistan, the nation coming back together, this goes back into we talk about the deep state. People say Oded Yinon, Greater Israel Project, right? Right now, Al-Qaeda is a subsidiary, right? Syria is just doing whatever, okay? And it just... it's not going to work, right? I mean, the people, you can put as much money behind Al-Qaeda and you can whitewash them and you can get all the sock puppet accounts to make al-Jawlani, this guy that had a $10 million bounty on his head, and make him seem like some whatever president, okay? But the people know, So anyways, that was just a random thing about the Kurds. Sorry, you guys got me going off in the crazies there, but... I did post an article, just overview of Iran's natural resources, okay? So you can look at some of that. Natural gas, third largest crude oil reserves, right? But again, the thing is about nuclear, right? That seems to be what it's all about. Got to have the nuclear power. So Frank, is it a foregone conclusion then that the bombings, I mean, this is going to... that or that other thing, another strategy, I mean, these things are going to be taken out?
How would I know? No, I don't know. I think it's a good idea to shut it down now, but the long-term solution has to be, retreat of the government from this project. And I'm not sure how that's going to happen. I mean, there's no plan for that that I've heard of.
And ML, if you wouldn't mind a recap of the bombers and what the actual logistics are looking at in terms of taking these things out.
Well, we're the only ones in the world that make the ordnance that can be used. And there is talk that Israel might be able to take one of theirs. but they would have to use an inferior C-130. They could technically fit. Who knows if that work has been done ahead of time? But it would be us if we were gonna. We're the power that can deliver the actual ordnance, and it's not just one. It would have to be several, and we only have a handful of them, if we even know that number. This would be the biggest one. We've never used this particular ordinance ever in combat. We've used variations of it or bases of it
Okay,
from
so
like
these aren't like 1,000, 2,000 are lying around.
no, this is like 30,000 pounds.
Yeah, I heard yesterday there were 8 available.
Yeah. But if we don't do anything, then it would be the next best thing would be realistically Israel would have to go do some kind of a raiding group and then go in there and then drill into it and then get to the point to where they could plant explosives on the ground, take their time, and then first, they would also probably grab whatever intel they could too. But the bottom line is Iran has no combat power really to stop us to do us or Israel or Saudi Arabia or the Taliban could throw a Coke bottle over the fence
because
and,
Raul,
and it would land.
already the 60% of the missile launchers that are in Iran are already been destroyed. I don't think with 33% of the missile launchers can become a problem, because I think people didn't notice is that also the number of missiles launched against Israel, they were diminishing. They were starting that were 1,000, then they became 100, and the last launch was just 15 missiles. That explains a lot about neither that Russia and China are helping them in any way to have extra missiles, but also to the fact that there wasn't do anything to have a production inside the country of these resources. Let's be honest, they were dependent on Russia, on China, and on smuggling of resources to other countries probably. And at the end, I think the biggest problem that a transitional government will have is not just the one of reproviding himself of a production of weaponry, but also another one to adjust all that resources that you were explaining, the hydroelectric, to use the nuclear to a real civil scope, because all these reactors, they were not used to give energy to people. They were just using in function to have nuclear weapons or to do nuclear experiments. And another thing is that the oil that they were selling, it was oil selling in non-OPEC prices. They were selling them to the money that they wish for in a black market kind of way. And that could be also a thing that can help to put the Iran in the OPEC system, also for future investors, whether it will be Chinese or from other countries, in my opinion.
I think I have to jump in here. I think you guys are falling for a lot of this Israeli hype about how awesome they're kicking Iran's ass. And I just don't believe any of these numbers. Like, they've destroyed 60% of the launchers. I don't think they even know how many launchers Iran has. And, the number of ballistic missiles, or the number of missiles that Iran has launched is diminished. But initially they were launching their older shit. So they would launch a ton of old stuff so one ballistic could get through, or the ballistics could get through. Now they've moved on to their more powerful modern missiles. I mean, we were just talking about this hospital getting hit, guys. Missiles are still breaking through. And don't forget, Israel is being damaged as well. There's been tremendous economic damage to Israel. The port, Haifa port's been damaged. The power plant in Haifa has been damaged. All of the gas terminals, the oil refinery's been damaged. There are military sites that have been hit where we don't have footage, so we don't really know exactly the extent of the damage. It's just there's a hype game going on. Anytime there's a war, there's a hype war going on too. And one side always like, oh, we're in total control. We've done this. We've done that. Like, every war is like that, just like Ukraine and Russia. I mean, for years, the hype was insane about, oh, Ukraine's going to invade and take back Crimea. And they have the best night vision fighters and all this. Like, don't fall for the hype, guys. Iran is a powerful country. They have a massive military. They fought in multiple wars that were declared against them. Don't underestimate these guys.
Before I get to Duke, I will just mention what Kevork Almassian was talking about, right? That in the last, I guess there was a last gasp of hope for the Syrian Arab army. Iran was supplying, weapons to the army, right? But they would not actually participate themselves, right? And so this is where I only knew of Persia really in historical terms. It wasn't until recently with Syria that I'm like, well, what is the role of Syria in all this? And watching Forged in Fire, okay, and Damascus steel. Why is it Damascus steel? Okay, this ancient practice, right, of steel making, right, and the superior steel from Syria, right? Deuteronomy 26:5. Okay, so Syria as a distinct culture, okay, as something unique amongst the Arabs, right, where we know otherwise it's a desert nomad and all those backward things, right? But Syria was something unique, and Syria was abandoned. I mean, first of all, Turkey was after it, right? And then even Iran essentially abandoned Syria in the end. Duke?
Yeah, Daryl, I would just say, and I agree about some of the hype, but if they're building a drone facility in your country and you don't know, I would say that they have a pretty good idea of the total count of missile launchers. Maybe not. I'd say they can get within 10% of what they've got. Now, how many they've taken out, that could be part of the hype, but there is the simple fact that the number of missiles being launched are significantly dwindling as the days go by. Now, whether they're running out of missiles or they're running out of launchers can be debated. But I do think they have a pretty good idea of how many they started with. And Raul, when you asked about the background, were you talking about the background noise, or were you talking about my background picture?
Well, tell us about the background picture now.
That is my grandson and the Admiral. He graduated basic training about 5 weeks ago. Had won the Navy Excellence Award. So we got to go cut cake with I flew up. It was in Chicago. I flew up and we got to cut cake with the Admiral and Master Chief of the Navy. He was there, and he is currently in San Antonio. No, Austin. San Antonio. Yeah. Going through his A school, and then will be deployed to Kingsport Naval Station around Savannah. So I will very soon have skin in the game.
You must be a proud grandfather there, Duke.
Very much so. Very much so.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that gives a nice positive uplift to our show about a very kind of dark topic. Unfortunately, this is the news cycle at the moment. Hang tight, folks, while I take us out, and then people can chill with us on Zoom here.
Sorry if we cut anyone off, but that's a wrap. Remember, you can catch us live Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. It's your chance to join the conversation and have your voice heard. Just check the link in the description or visit americastalk.show. Together, through the free exchange of ideas, we can truly make America great again. Don't miss out. Tune in and be part of the dialogue.